Hey, I'm Natalie Potts, and this is the Natalie Potts podcast. If you want to talk about your business, your life, your health, and more, then you are in the right place. We do it all with humour, love, and inspiration to help you create a life you love. So, let's dive in. Thank you so much, Jack, for joining me today. Delighted to have you on and be able to catch up with you. It's been a long time since we've done a Zoom or anything. So, let's jump straight into it. Tell us all about Jack and what you do.
Right, so my name is Jack. I've been in the sort of coaching industry for a good while now, in sort of starting off with more fitness-based stuff, and over the last year really kind of transitioned now more into helping people set up their systems and kind of run things a bit more efficiently. If you're a coach, if you're a PT, essentially the whole point of what I'm trying to do is help people get online in the most efficient way possible. I've gone through kind of business mentorships myself. I've gone through coaching things myself, and what I've typically found is that a lot of them really treat you a lot like a number, and very much that they want their kind of transformation, they want their before and after, where someone goes from very low numbers of maybe income to this huge high, and it looks fantastic when you see someone go from 0 to 20k, 50k a month, 10k a month, whatever it is. But very much what I've noticed is, one, you get treated like a number, like I say, in that process. But number two is they don't really teach you about the foundations of how things really run. So to be able to sustain that long term, you need systems in place, you need ways of things running, and you need to be able to sort of be capable of managing that long term. 15k of business is a fucking huge amount of money to be turning over, and a lot of people and a lot of moving parts. If you don't have the systems in place to manage that, it's all going to come tumbling down. So once they get there nice before and after, typically things tend to drop off because there is a natural bottleneck in what you do. So I guess what you could say I kind of do nowadays is help people build the foundations upon which they can really scale things and grow things up. So instead of building your house on sand, you're building it on like a really strong foundation to build a skyscraper if you wanted to.
Yeah.
That's essentially what I do.
I love all of that, and a lot of that resonates, and is even having me thinking about, do I do that? Could I do that?
Yeah.
It's you're spot on. And what I like the part about is to share around like building a sustainable, a long serving, and what you actually need to do, and really essentially slowing down a process opposed to this instant gratification, let's get results overnight, which, magic wand stuff we just know isn't true.
Yeah.
And I really feel like you shared there, and I keep saying this, so it's just proving how profound and true this is coming to be for people if they listen to this. But the conversation is changing this year around people feeling genuinely connected and genuinely valued,
Yeah.
and like you say, that they don't feel a number. And essentially, I love doing the podcast I'm doing, like we're doing for today. It's sharing with people about connection, collaboration, that you can have 150 people, you can have 10, you can have 100 people in a community, or you can have 1,000, but if they aren't engaged and nurtured and if people don't feel valued, then there's no point. There's no point having 100,000 followers
Yeah.
for just a numbers game and things. Like, you really want to invest in people and serve them and truly help them. And then obviously, like, if it's not for you, then it's not for you. Allowing people to say it's cool as well. There isn't a pressure there, but there is so many people in the world doing the opposite to that. And I think that the opportunity you have now around this for over the next year, massively, because people are very wise to that, is going to be completely changing the world we're in terms of coaching and mentoring.
Yeah, I think with a lot of, I mean, what you're saying there really is like kind of like society nowadays is very much quick results. Things need to come very fast, but actually anything that's kind of long standing or lasts a lot longer, or generally has a lot of value within it, or maybe has a lot of benefit to it, actually generally comes from things that aren't that fun to do. They're not that sexy to do. They take a bit longer
Yeah.
to place, and that's not something that comes overnight. Like you can that said, I think something like coaching is it's an industry where you can get a really good amount of growth. Like you can see very large amounts of growth quite quickly.
Yeah.
But like I say, the whole point of what I want to do is make sure that that's actually sustainable. So you don't get this big peak and then stressed out your fucking mind, can't manage anything, can't do anything.
Mm.
What I try and do really is I take on a lot of that stress to figure out that out, and then I can pass it on to people without them having to actually do that stress and kind of go through that process themselves. So I think that's where you're trying, especially with communities as well, where you're trying to create something that's bigger than just you or just a number of people. you need to have the minimal amount of stress possible in
Mm.
what your kind of mental toll of running things is, or your mental bandwidth of running things is so that you can actually focus on that community. And community is a really big one for anyone, because it really, that's where people buy into processes more. Like, there's a lot of things that I've joined over the last few years where I've stayed a lot longer than I would have done because it's had a really good community, and I liked how it was run, liked how, you know, people go through different processes and stuff like that. So I think that's a huge thing as well.
Yeah, and now I know a bit of your journey since we met probably what, 2018, 2019, I think, that's when I started business.
Yeah.
So I was working on a mastermind. Well, actually, it was my coach. And then he asked me to be a part of it. So I was doing a personal development and a bit of confidence coaching, a bit of mindset as well. So that's how I got to meet some amazing people and keep those connections to be like we are now, like collaborating. And that's again proof that you build great relationships with people, and you can be very different industries or businesses, but you can still come together. You mentioned, and I know you are very invested in your own development. Let's go on a spin of where do you think you'd be if you hadn't made those investments very early on in your business and personal development?
Yeah. I got asked this question the other day, actually, kind of, well, similar question. And I think for the most part, it is kind of where you like, let's say you've got like 100 points of energy, right? You can give 100 points of like to everything in your life. So that might be something along the lines of your hygiene, eating good food, brushing your teeth, all that sort of stuff. Then you've got energy you give to work, and, you know, getting better work quality and being productive at work. You've got something that you give to social stuff. You've got stuff that you give to family. Across the board, everything's got 100 points. I typically think where you dictate more of those points, those things tend to grow. So I think when you kind of go into processes and you put more points into like a certain area, they tend to grow more. So when you go into things like you're investing in yourself and you're kind of trying to learn skills, you're kind of putting a lot of that energy into those things. When I talk about energy, I'm talking about kind of like your resources. So your time, your effort, your focus, money, those kind of things. And you typically get faster results out of things that you can do that with, because you know that every single one of those points that you're dictating towards something is going in the right direction. So where I've maybe invested in myself has been through seeing someone else achieving something and going, okay, I like the ideas of what that person's done. I don't have to then go through and make all the mistakes of what you can make, because I know someone else has done that already for me. They can break down, here's the best way to do it. Here's the best route to take through it. Another way you could look at it is like, you know, let's say you got like a blank map and you want to get from A to B. Well, you could go one route and end up in a big swamp and it takes you 5 days to get to place. You could go another way as a big mountain you've got to climb over to get to from one point to another point. Or someone who's gone through all those routes before has then gone, actually, you know what, there's a little cut through there and you just have to go through the forest. It looks a bit shit, but actually it's the quickest way through. So a lot of the time when you're sort of thinking about like what's the best way to get to somewhere, I think investing in yourself is the best way. And I think for myself, in terms of like where I am now versus where, you know, everyone starts, which is nothing for the most part, I think I'm way ahead of where I would have been. And I can see that, like, you know, looking at other people who have gone through that same process and haven't potentially like invested themselves, you know, the way I can look at certain situations, or have learned about things, or I can kind of see similarities in how things work. I think a lot of that just comes through experiences and kind of putting that effort and that energy and those points into myself rather than trying to spread them across everything. I've been very kind of focused in that. So I think I have grown a lot faster than I would have done. Would I maybe be in a better place if I did that more often? I think yes. I think it's one of those things that really compounds. Like at the start, you don't see as much of a benefit, and then over time, it starts to really accumulate, and you can really see the benefits out of it. I would say in the last year, I've definitely seen more positives out of that than I have in previous years, because it's starting to like click. You know, when you have like I don't know, maybe you're learning a new skill or something, like it's like with instruments, I found this, like when I was playing guitar, you go through something and it was really just clunky and you'd like miss notes and stuff. And then all of a sudden one day you just go and it just smooth sailing the whole way through and you're like, fuck, that's easy. So it's like, it's a bit like that. It's like you have this really clunky kind of method and then suddenly just one day it just goes boom and you've got it. So I think that's kind of where that whole thing comes from. I don't know if I answered the question very well there. My
You did.
brain's
I love It's just everything you imagine. I love it. I think you're spot on, and it's a wonderful reflection in terms of when the kind of the cliche, the light bulb moment happens. And
Yeah.
I remember being my first, naturally I lie, it was the second business coach after I'd worked with Chris. And look, like we said, I think before we started this today, we are just talking about some coaches that we know, but we would take almost the good, bad, the ugly of people, right? And that's okay. And the same as I said, I used to with leaders who used to lead me, that there's parts I liked and parts I didn't. And they allowed me to make judgments, to go, this is how I want to be, this is how I want to run a business, and likewise the opposite as well. And I remember at the time there was things I'd learned and the mastermind, but then I needed something else. And then I worked with somebody and I was like, I'm not getting enough of this, but I'm getting this. And I do remember though, if I took one thing from what she shared with me, was that it's it's an amalgamation of everything. It's not just one thing. It's like Steve Jobs says in his, I think it's his Stanford talk, where it's about connecting the dots. It's about the puzzle pieces together. And I always use the terminology you use in language of it's clunky. So where I mentor at the Coaching Academy, I always say to people like, you are here, you're not there yet. So let's focus when you're at, and it's going to feel clunky. It's just, and then it will start clicking into place because you're going to understand more about that. Then you're going to understand more about that. And then you see, oh, those two go together. Then you practice it. And then time is a big one, trusting time, experience as well, to let that just evolve, let things be without a pressure. And I think I'm like yourself, I've always continued to invest. And I've had pockets where I haven't for a certain period of time, because I'm like, I don't know what I need next, or I know I need something, but I need to work out what it is. I think that what's helped me there has been the self-awareness, personal development in that as well, and knowing exactly what I want to achieve personally, and that growth again isn't always going to be linear. It might be a bit scattergun, but then that's the same as success, right? There's definitely been parts where I've not invested in people as well, because I've been thinking, what do I need? And I think that that's just as powerful. And you need to have the part that's been the change for me there is a continual personal development, personal growth. And that I think something we don't talk enough about is that growth and success isn't always going to be linear. It's going to be a bit more what I used to call jungle gym in the corporate world. We might go here, there, and everywhere, and then get there. And it's about enjoying where you're at. I think there's a big thing with also building a business, that you think that you just want it right now, and you're going for the next thing, and we'll do it today. We'll be working on for something coming up, and then tomorrow lands. It's like, right, I'm working for something coming up, and we don't enjoy the moment enough.
Yeah.
And I'm very conscious of that this year, is being very visionary, being very goal-driven results, and knowing what I want and achieving great things. But if I can't enjoy the moment as well, then what's the point?
Yeah. So there's kind of two things that's made me think through. Number one is when it comes to kind of like you're saying, like enjoying the journey and going through that process and kind of being okay with actually, where you're at the moment, I think is a good way of maybe thinking about it. Is it's good to have long-term goals and kind of look ahead at where you want to be. But equally, there's been many points in my life where I would say I'm quite good at like achieving goals. Like if I set a goal, I know it will happen. It's just a matter of how long kind of thing. And
what do I need to do?
Yeah. And every goal I've ever set, I have achieved. But what I've noticed and what I've really been quite hot on in the last year is, for example, last year, I think I achieved like 2 or 3 of like my biggest goals all in one sort of month period. And off the back of that, I was really depressed, felt very, very low, felt really shit. I just was like, every day I was just like, what the fuck am I doing? And I kind of was like trying to figure out myself. And I think it's a very normal part of it. I think there are phases where you're trying to figure things out and you're trying to work things out. And I just felt like absolute shit. So I went to sort of talk to a therapist. I was like, look, there's something like, if you need to get in shape physically, you talk to a coach or a trainer or a PT. It's like, right, if I want to figure something out with my brain, let's go talk to someone who like, this is their job, is like to help you figure out things and kind of look a bit more introspectively at yourself. So I went to speak to this therapist, and at the start when we went in, you go and do these little tests and they ask you to fill things out. And on that test, I scored like 23 out of 25 on both I think it was one for depression and one for anxiety. And I'm not someone who I would say
Yeah.
I've never before sort of when like early 20s, I would have never have felt depressed in my life. But going into that, I felt just crap all the time, and I couldn't figure it out, couldn't put my finger on it. And we went through a few weeks trying to figure it out. And as you do, you kind of work through these things. And it got to the end of that period, and I was kind of like speaking to him. Now, he probably wasn't the best person to talk to at the time because he had a very different mindset to me. But what I kind of figured out off the back of it was I really like having goals, and I really like having a purpose that I'm trying to work towards. And that was the important thing, was that I had something that was in the works, and that I had something that I felt was like valuable for me to do, and that I could help other people like in achieving. Whether it could have been anything. And almost when I solved that, and then I sort of went, right, cool, I know I need to solve that. Within a week or two, I set some new goals. I was like, right, where am I going long term? What would I want to do with these things? In like almost overnight, felt 100% again. I was just like, where's this come from? And it was all off the back of having like a bit of purpose and something. So a lot of the time you see this happen with people who set these massive goals, and they I don't know if you've seen that Jonah Hill documentary. In fact, he talks to his therapist in that documentary. He talks about this kind of ideal vision of where you are in your life, and in this ideal vision, it's where you want to be, what you've achieved, life is. And I think a lot of people use that as something to drive towards, which I think is great. It's good to set goals like that. But what happens is he was in a situation where very young, he managed to get to that ideal position in his life, like, you know, in his teens, early 20s, very quickly. And he said as soon as he got to that point, he realized that it was just pointless. And he was just like, oh, there's no, I feel really worthless now, because actually I've got to what I thought was the end goal, and I don't feel any better. I don't feel this amazing euphoria of how I feel. And I think that's the reality across the board, is that a lot of people think that when you get like a Lamborghini, or you get £1 million in the bank, or you achieve X, Y, Z, you're going to feel this like euphoric feeling. But actually, I think a lot of what you benefit from, and a lot of what you really enjoy, is that process of going through things. You hear millionaires speak about all the time, really successful people. They'd give up everything they've got just to go back to the start and have nothing and grind through it all again. And as much as things are very unenjoyable experience a lot of the time, I actually find that those are the things that create the most satisfaction in your life, is when something's hard and you do get that little win off the back of it. You're like, fucking yes, go on. Because it's that process that you're going through, which is the enjoyable bit. We all think it's the end goal that's the thing that you really want to achieve, but I think actually you get more out of the process. I think most people think, oh, I'd love to not work, I'd love to win the lottery, just live on a beach, drink cocktails. I can guarantee you, almost everyone in the world, if they achieve that, they would be depressed within a month, because they've got no stimulus. You need hard shit to make your brain kind of work and whirl around. So even in times where I'm feeling crap and stressed out about something, there's times where I've got less commitments to do, and I know I feel awful in those times, and I actually wish I had something to do, or I had something, a little bit of stress. I think there is levels of too much stress, and you talk about that kind of allostatic load, which is all the stress you have. So a bell curve, there is a peak amount that you want, but if you overreach that, you start to break down. You need a bit of stress in your life. So where you're looking at kind of what you're moving towards, actually I think looking at that end goal is sometimes, or focusing too much on the end goal can kind of be a little bit detrimental to yourself.
I remember you spoke a bit about it earlier as well, and then it sparked the reflection for me. But I remember back in September, one of my mentors said about just sometimes we've got to fall in love with being a bit bored when building business as well, and enjoying that process with that still. So that's something I've definitely been really reflecting on, because I think it's absolutely key. And thank you first of all for sharing as well about the therapy, because I put a post out last week actually about the fact that I've started therapy again last week for about 8 weeks, and it's only CBT, and I've had it before and it hasn't always worked, but I'm open-minded. But what I noticed is years ago when I did need it, because I got to that point of stress and overwhelm, like pure horrific exhaustion was the reason, I was like, I needed it. And now I'm very much of the, actually I know that I can inspire and empower people and motivate them to know that it's okay to talk about these things. And actually everyone, I got some messages and it's lovely, but it was like, are you okay? Is everything? I was like, yeah. I'm doing it because my life's going well. I'm very aware now that I've had a lot of change in my life personally and professionally, and I kind of need a different space than the people around me. I've got amazing abundance of coaches, mentors, friends, people like yourself, anyone that I could call on to if I wanted to genuinely for things. But sometimes I just want that space of no one knowing me and just listening. And that will actually, it might be a bit of slowing down, but I need that again as well to say, right, then I've got this next level coming in time, etc. So I think that's where I see the power in personal development, knowing ourselves really well, and that I'm in control of things. There's no one dictating that of me. And yeah, I think that it's interesting to see we can all be very different in what we do. And again, the power of what I'm wanting to emphasize on a connection collaboration part is how much we can draw and learn from one another. And there's so many people around us. And I think that's where building a business is absolutely key. The right people around you, the right environments, the right support, because you might not have that around you.
I think with business as well, like today's day and age, a lot of businesses are now started online, completely online.
Yeah.
You don't really have any kind of face-to-face contact. For me, something that was really evident when I started, and I think this comes back to community as well, is like if you can get into a community of people who are very like-minded, first of all, it can be very lonely if you're just going on your own. Like if I didn't have the community I have around me, both, of where I have clients, but also friends, family, stuff like that, like it would be very lonely, because ultimately I get up, I sit at my desk, and I don't talk to anyone unless I go to Tesco for like some food, or I go to the gym, or talk to the bus driver. For most days, that's kind of an average day, because you don't have the sort of thing where you go into an office and you go, oh, how was the weekend? Oh yeah, it was your brother's birthday. How was that? Oh yeah, you got really pissed. And they tell a story, and you have those little micro interactions. It doesn't have to be all this kind of like heavy contact, but if you don't have that at all, it's very, very lonely. I think a lot of people sat through COVID as well, as you actually need just those little bits kind of contact. So having that community is really good. Now, when you're starting out, it's taken me, I would say maybe over the last 3 years, I would say my sort of network of people's really got quite good, where I'm like, oh, this is good. I know people who can do this. I know people can do that. If I need to talk to people on certain areas, I can kind of get specialists to come in certain areas, and I can, even friends where I can just kind of rely on them. But that doesn't build very quickly. Like it's quite hard to get into those areas. And if you are someone who maybe is a little bit more growth minded, or you've got quite big goals, ambitions and things, it's quite hard to find people who align with that. I even to this day, I find people who have got a lot of people like goals that align with me, but I don't find many people with the same sort of mindset towards like work and that kind of work ethic. And that's what I value in things. So I find that very hard to find people that I gel with. That's not me going, oh, look, I'm very amazing.
No. That resonates.
More so it's just like, I know what I like to do, and I know that I gel best with the people who do the
I've definitely noticed the last 6 months, as I've been looking at ending a mastermind and going to a new one. This is a girl that said she'd never join a mastermind after one. But I was saying earlier to somebody, I've definitely noticed a difference in being around people that work bloody hard. And I say it sometimes like I've always been a grafter for years and years, and I've worked hard, and like, what hours you're finishing, it's like when the job's done. Like that's just what I've grown up knowing. So it's just I'm conformed to that. But it's also like I was on something last week talking about work-life balance. And they're saying you need time off, you need to tell people your boundaries. And I was like, I also love what I do though. Like we're going too far the opposite way, telling people about work-life balance, but telling them what they need to do. And it's like I don't conform to that. Like I know what's right for me. And I've started noticing that the people I am around, you're right, it gets smaller. And you have to work on those relationships. They're not overnight, and you have to invest in terms of time, money, everything, effort, getting to know them, building trust. That's a big one. And but what I do find is like we all work bloody hard, and there's nothing wrong in that. And I've noticed it's a bit of a taboo subject, a little bit, when you look at like the Elon Musk. I remember putting something out about when he was saying that you either work these hours or you go. And like someone slammed me on social media for it. Like, it's disgusting. How could you say that? I was like, because there is nothing wrong in saying hard graft. And I'm not going to his extremes, but I'm just saying we're also getting into world, and I don't want to lead off too much on this, but there's nothing wrong in working hard and loving what you do, and saying this is right for me. I guess essentially this boils down to knowing yourself really well to what you need to do for your business and trusting that.
Yeah, with like hard work, I would say I've always had like good work ethic. It's not always been there in my life. There has been periods where it's kind of waned a bit, and there's been reasons for that. So for example, I remember I traveled Australia for a year, and we did a lot of jobs that were very low commitment, and you could, the opportunity there to get away with taking the piss a bit with, like, you get a job that was needed 5 people, and they would hire like 15 people, like literally 15 people. So there would be, you could work really hard, but because there's so many people there, it's kind of like that whole thing of it's that kind of like social consciousness, right? Like you see a homeless person sitting in the street and they're asking for money. Well, if you're in a big crowded place, you probably feel a lot less like you have to give that person money, because you're like, well, there's a lot of other people here. It's a shared consciousness towards like, okay, do I need to put my effort in here? Whereas if it was just a handful of people, you probably feel a lot more like, okay, I probably need to do my part here. It's very much the same with that. So there was opportunities where, you could do that. I would say it's waned a bit, but in other places, I know that at my core, I work very hard, and I will work, I push myself to my boundaries. I think that's a very good thing to develop. Where it comes up to, like, I guess, yeah, work-life balance, I think, is a bit of a myth. I don't really personally believe in it, and I'm happy for
Yeah,
anyone.
I said this to someone the other day. I've quite a few Americans I know as well, and I find they're like, work-life balance doesn't exist, and I'm a little bit like that. But I've kind of shut down talking and saying that because people like over here are big on it now. But I don't. Like, for me, that was the part that I don't know that it does. Maybe I don't know the answer to it enough yet.
I think there is overkill. So I think there is such things as working too much, and I think you do have a max capacity you can work at. And if I go back to that analogy of like 100 points, the analogy I use with my clients all the time when they say they're like overworked, right? So they might, this is how I would see it. You've got 100 points, and you have to spend 10-20 points on just general getting a sleep, looking after yourself, cooking, eating, hygiene, washing, like doing your laundry. All that stuff takes up some points, right? That's energy, focus, time, attention. Then you might have if you take two different people, one person might have a family, one person doesn't have a family. Well, the person who has a family inherently has to spend more points on that. They have less points left over afterwards. Whereas myself, I don't have a family that I have to, put that time and effort and energy into. So I've got more points than someone else. So you start adding up all these things. Well, some person might have a part-time job versus a full-time job. Well, they have to give more points to that. And it gets to a point where you can only maximally allocate those 100 points to what you want to do. If you give more points to one area, it generally tends to grow faster. So if you're trying to spread your energy over 5 different projects, the person who goes and just puts all their energy into that one project, one project probably is going to grow faster, get bigger, do better than someone who's trying to spread all their energy across these things. But I also think you can overspend. So if you go over that 100-point allotment and kind of spend too much time working, too much time pushing yourself too hard, you actually start to reduce the amount of energy you can give to something, because then you start kind of taking away from it. Something has to give somewhere. It's either going to be your personal care and personal hygiene. I think that's where people kind of maybe start to see sort of mental health issues coming in, stress levels going up, their ability to manage those things diminishes, or they're just overall time. Something's going to break somewhere if you do that. So I think when it comes to work-life balance, there is such thing as too much, and you do need to take time off. But I also do think a lot of people nowadays are quite soft with things, and they do 5 hours. I've seen it myself. Like, people do like 5 hours work, and they're like, oh, that's too much.
Yeah, I had a client a while ago, and we had to get to a point. I was like, I just need to ask, like, how many hours are you doing a day? And they're like, oh, well, I kind of get up, then I do an hour on this, an hour on that, like probably, I don't know, like 2 or 3 hours. And I'm like, I'm gonna be really honest, like I can't work like this with you. We've got to understand, we've got to just actually draw a line right now and just have a bit of a recontract on a few things, because that's just not going to work. And you've got to have the right relationship to do that as well, and invest in that person. But what I like your idea of the points. I think I've known very, like, what we used to say was like, what gets measured gets done, like what you focus on, and the ability to spin all the metaphorical plates and everything. I kind of want to just as well, coming around to bring this in a bit, but who do you ideally work with as a client? Who's your ideal client?
So typically the people I want to I will work with coaches and PTs. If you want to sort of make, either you are online, you want to make things way more efficient and you want to kind of systematize things. And when I talk about systems, it is not just technology. I think this is a mistake people make. It's not just technology and automations and programs and shit. It's also ways of thinking, right? So how do you think about how do you make a decision in the way that is replicable and will get the same result? Anyone who wants to do that, if you're a PT in person, you want to make sure that you're getting online in the most efficient way possible. You're not spending loads of money making mistakes or time or stuff like that. That's a kind of ideal person. But realistically, if you really go deeper on that, I want people who are willing to put a bit of hard work into things. And realistically, probably like a younger version of myself is like the ideal person, because I very much am willing to put hard work into things. And I think the least ideal person, like say it's a PT or a coach who fits that criteria, but their kind of mindset is very much, you see a lot of people who go into things and they go, oh, this is hard, and then they give up in a month. That winds me up, not just in my program, I mean just in general in life, where people just give up after a month really winds me up. And I always think, like, something I've been doing this last sort of 6-7 months is I used to read loads of books, and I used to go through loads of books, half finish them, get a bit bored with them. So I've done two things with this that I think kind of carries over to that bit. Number one is, if I read a book, I don't read a book like, for example, what we got here, that's Daily Stoic. So let's say it's a book you're reading through, right? Usually people go through one page. What I do with books now is I go, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? I open the book to that place in the wherever it is, whatever chapter it is, and I go, right, here's the problem I'm trying to solve, here's the solution. And then I will read that section of the book over and over and over again, and I will keep implementing things within it until that problem's solved. And then I'll go back onto the next thing. So when it comes to a book, not only do I read it not in order at all, but I will only read that book until that book is like absolutely like exhausted from like content and how things are going. Because if someone's taken the time to read a book and it's a good to write a book and it's a good book and they've got any smarts in anything, that's a lot of knowledge compact into one place. You can take a lot out of it if you spend that time doing it. I think, to be honest, actually picking up Daily Stoic is a perfect example of that, because Stoicism and, you know, philosophy is all about thinking deeper on something that at surface level.
It's the only book I have read back to back. I've read it since 2018. I've read that every day. I love it.
So it's a really good way of doing it. And the original question was, but then when it comes to like programs and things like that, and I really am a big believer that if you could sign up for something and just do it for a year, you would see way more benefits than doing 4 things in a year or 3 things in a year and swapping and chopping and changing. Like, really milk things for what they're worth and get the absolute best out of them. And I typically think people who do that generally will see the best results. That doesn't mean that if something's shit, don't leave it and move on to something else. But what I do think is that, so like, it could be just getting in shape and following a training program. Stick to that program for a year and see what happens, rather than, oh, I've just done this for 6 months or like 6 weeks and I'm a bit bored of it, and then chopping and changing things. And I think that's probably the best thing to do. It's kind of going like, it's like, if you can get really comfortable with just doing the same thing, like you said, like the boring stuff, like that is the stuff that really gets you the most benefit, right? So when things become boring, it probably becomes a bit boring because you're like, oh, it's not exciting. Well, generally exciting things are very like high peak, quick drop off. The boring stuff's very like, oh, this is shit, this is shit, this is shit, this is shit. And then at some point in the future, you get the compound interest of all of that. But I think that's typically how things go.
It's spot on. Love all of that. Where can people connect with you?
Instagram is mainly where I'm at, but on
you
YouTube,
are very funny on Instagram. You often make me laugh. That's why you probably just get a little emoji face or something when I just respond to your stories.
Instagram's kind of where I'm mainly at, but I am on other platforms. But to be honest, I don't really push those as much at the moment. But on YouTube, got stuff on YouTube, Instagram, Jack Symons official. Got a podcast, Elite Coaching Blueprint podcast as well, which is good. We try and talk to, you know, people within the coaching industry to make sure that they are essentially helping you get the best results out of your clients. It could be client psychology, it could be systems, it could be physiotherapists, it could be people who are experts at training, everything in between.
Love it. And like you said, I think that's something I've been focusing on this year with one of my coaches, is creating goals that are more around the lifestyle I want, and then aligning clients to be in a certain mindset and saying like, that's, this is who I want to work with and what that looks like. And yeah, when you start to get really clear on that yourself, then that's what you start attracting.
I think that's a big one, is making sure you're clear on it. And also with, actually, I don't know why it's just sparked that, but what you said before about like Elon Musk and his kind of work ethic towards stuff, right, is going back a little bit there, but a lot of people have like goals that they want to achieve, like these huge things, but then they're not willing to put in the work that would correlate with that, right? So something I've started doing with like check-ins with clients recently is I'll ask them like, how did this go? Did you achieve XYZ this week? Did you tick off your tasks? Did you do this week? And if it comes back as no, I didn't do all those things, the question I will then ask is, do you feel that is in line with the goals that you want to achieve or the outcome you want to achieve? And very much that puts a bit of self-reflection on people, where they go, oh shit, actually maybe not. So if you want to like live a lavish lifestyle and own a super yacht and things like that, then yeah, you probably have to work more than 5 hours a week, and it probably isn't going to be the most work-life balancing ever going. I think you've kind of got to, if anything, I think you've got to earn that work-life balance.
Love it. What a point to end on. Jack, thank you so much for your time. Connect with Jack as well if you're interested. He's a great contact to have. He's great connection. So thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you felt inspired, please make sure you share this with a friend and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. I really love hearing feedback from you. So if you have a question, topic, or want to hear from someone you love on this show, then head to my website, Natalie Potts Coaching, and let me know. Until next time, have an amazing week and know that you have value to offer this world.